Hello, this is the Doctor of Digital, and welcome to the Aftermath program and phenomenal co-host, Kindra Reiber, co-parenting mentor, and also, I'm going to mention it, Kindra, featured in We the Parents documentary. So yes,
You had to mention that, Mick. You just
I
have to, right?
I
But
mentioned that. Yes, it's a great documentary and it features you. So yes,
yeah,
let's give it a plug.
it is. And you know what? It's gonna be hopefully public in a couple of months, but right now that documentary is being used in legislation to show to legislators through different state houses what's going on in the change in what we're proposing in the laws across the states in the United States. So we're going for 50-50 equal shared parenting, which is the way it should be. That's how you are in a marriage, and that's the way it needs to be in a divorce. That's what it's about, but I'm hoping that eventually I'll be able to share it publicly, but right now it's just private showings.
And I understand eventually then you can request a local screening. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, you can request that now. So if you have a group that you want to have watch it, and it doesn't have to be legislation, it is gaining traction quickly through the states. And actually, I think because of that, we've gained a few new listeners to our podcast too.
If you like this episode and other episodes of The Aftermath, make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and of course, positively review us on Apple Podcasts. The purpose of the show is to educate and to inspire you. Everything that is wrong with families today are the hard topics that we discuss. Both of us have been subjected to the harsh reality and trauma of custody battles. But during our battles, we have not been alone. Did you know that divorce lawyers have a similar nature of work as that of family lawyers? During divorce proceedings, close communication and clear communication is key. Communication cuts both ways. Your lawyer must also be a good listener, able to hear and fully comprehend your wishes, goals, and priorities. Having a certified divorce financial analyst on your team during a divorce can reduce stress and save money on legal fees. Many of the decisions made in divorce are financial in nature. High net worth divorces can be more complicated financially than other divorces, involve asset valuation, hidden assets, and complex tax issues. Hiring experienced representation is non negotiable in high net worth divorces. During this episode, we'll discuss all these issues to understand how they work and how they may be the correct option for you. By the end of this episode, you will be better equipped to know what to do, and we will encourage you to contact our guest, matrimonial attorney, certified divorce and financial analyst, and high net worth representative, Lisa Zeider.
Where does a client often make a mistake? I think a client often makes a mistake by signing a tax return that they just don't even understand, or that they haven't reviewed with an accountant, or that they saw for 5 seconds and somebody said, you have to sign this. And they signed it thinking this was just fine. And it wasn't so fine. And now they're having a tax return filed with the government that isn't appropriate.
We'll be back in a moment with Lisa. Welcome to The Aftermath, a podcast that rips the Band Aid off the collective scars of divorce, custody battles, and the trauma of family drama. Kindra Reiber and Mick Smith pull back the curtain and explore stories that put the heart wrenching puzzle pieces together with inspiring stories, notable experts, and actionable tips. Let the healing begin. Welcome to the program, Lisa. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you today?
We're doing great, and we thank you for taking out some time from your busy schedule to chat with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning a lot, Lisa. So a lot of times we spend talking about children and custody issues. So I'm really excited to dive into the financial side of things today.
Great. That sounds great.
Yeah, one of the things we were curious about is what inspired you to become a matrimonial attorney and certified divorce and financial analyst in the first place?
So when I actually decided to do this, I was in the fashion business, believe it or not, and had a company on 7th Avenue and was going through my own divorce. And as a result of going through my own divorce and dealing with a lot of the financial issues, such as business valuations and support issues, et cetera, I actually became very interested and decided that was an area that I wanted to pursue. And it was also an area that I felt I could make a very big difference for people. One of the things that I had seen and often heard about was that A lot of attorneys didn't respond, weren't responsive, et cetera, to their clients. And that was one of my experiences, unfortunately, during my divorce. And I also understood that a lot of things could have moved along much more smoothly had there been more responsiveness. And so I created eventually a company. It's 10 years old now. Created a company that actually we're 20 plus attorneys, 25 plus attorneys at this point, including a trust and estates area. And our goal is to be as responsive as we possibly can to our clients.
Great. Congratulations on 10 years. That's amazing. And 25 attorneys. That's great. So, how wide do you spread? What areas do you cover?
We really cover Manhattan, the Brooklyn area, Kings County, Westchester for sure, Rockland, Putnam, and Dutchess. And then we actually have branched out to Long Island, including Nassau and Suffolk County. So that's our area. I would say the most of our clientele is in Manhattan, Kings County, and in Rockland and Westchester County.
Great. Okay. So, I'm sure we all make a ton of mistakes financially as we're going through a divorce, but what are maybe some of the common things that you see and can share with people on the common mistakes and then how to avoid those?
So I think the first thing is making sure that you've identified the assets. And a lot of times the assets may not be so easily identifiable. And I one of the most common mistakes is not picking up on a particular asset. So you need to make sure that you and your spouse have actually exchanged net worth statements and that valuations have been performed to the extent that they need to be performed by business valuators or retirement people, experts who can actually help figure out the retirement accounts, whether they're defined benefit plans, whether they're contribution plans, what they are, and how to break them apart in a way that is tax effective and also in a way that you're going to get what you should be actually receiving. So I think those are definitely mistakes that we see. Also, the issue of income, not, I see attorneys, frankly, who can't read tax returns, business tax returns, and that becomes really an issue because you need to be able to understand those tax returns. And as a client, you need to make sure of what you're signing. And so, if you're going to ask me where does a client often make a mistake, I think a client often makes a mistake by signing a tax return that they just don't even understand, or that they haven't reviewed with an accountant, or that they saw for 5 seconds and somebody said, "You have to sign this," and they signed it thinking this was just fine, and it wasn't so fine, and now they're having a tax return filed with the government that isn't appropriate.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I want to step back just a couple of minutes here and focus or define a couple of the things that you said. So, when you talk about assets, can you define what you mean by that?
Sure, so it can be anything from bank accounts, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, any investment that you may have made, whether it be in a limited partnership or real property of some sort. And of course, your home and other real property investments that you might have made. There also could be personal property. You might have a wine collection, that's an asset. A watch collection, another asset, jewelry, assets. All of those are assets. So anything from literally the cash that is in your wallet all the way to the personal property and to the banking institutions, et cetera, and the investments that you may have made.
Wonderful. Okay. And then one other question around that, and then Mick, I'll let you get back to your question here. But if you're looking at gathering information and you're talking about your net worth statements, and say you have a business that's with your current husband, right? They're not exes till we get divorced. So as we're going through this, husband or wife, you have a business with them. Do you need to pull your own and do your own I'm gonna call it investigation of your financial assets both separately? Or do you, if the husband says, I already pulled that and I have that statement I can provide, do you use that? Or should you use somebody else to review things that you have together?
So you want to have somebody independent whenever possible to be able to review, particularly a business valuation. I, I don't know why somebody would necessarily have a business valuation handy unless they were actually selling the business. Maybe there is a sale that's imminent, and so there have been appraisals, et cetera. But and it should be to somebody who is a non-interested third party, right? That is, yeah, also the question, right? But notwithstanding that, you need to make sure that you have an independent person appraise it, because you don't know what the real reason was that this handy little document is around. And you also are not necessarily equipped to look at it out of the lens of someone who does this for a living and who, frankly, does this for purposes of looking at it in a divorce situation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And along those lines, I think the question would be, what are some of the practical steps that a person can take to protect their finances before, during, and after a divorce?
Okay, so that's a big question. I would say the first practical step, and I was just lecturing on this yesterday, but the first practical step before the divorce would be to get a prenup before the marriage, right? That is the most practical step that one can take, particularly if you're going to own a business together in some way, because that will give you each the delineation of how that business is going to be essentially split up in the event of a divorce, because now you have not only a family situation, but you also have your livelihood that is involved. And so combining those two, a prenup would have been really appropriate. If you did not get a prenup, then a postnup would be also appropriate. And that is not for every state, because I understand that in some states they're less enforceable than in other states. But in New York, a postnup would often be the way to go. A trust might also be a vehicle that could have been appropriate to basically band everything together that should be together and to protect it in some way. So those are the things that you could have done before the divorce. The other thing I would say is that now you're married. We don't necessarily have the prenup or the postup or the trust. And the next thing that you should be doing is making sure that you are well aware of your assets and your liabilities, and that would include those of your spouse. And that would take transparency on both parties' part, but it should be something that starts from day one and is part of your marriage and your discussion with your spouse. What are the assets? What are the liabilities? What do the finances look like? And if someone is being less than transparent, that already is a very bad signal for probably what will come later. Transparency, making sure to keep your eyes open during the marriage, right? You can trust your spouse implicitly, and your spouse might be the most trustworthy worthy person that there is. But I will say that I think when people are paying less attention, things get out of hand that shouldn't get out of hand. And so making sure that you look at the credit card statements, the tax returns, the financial statements, getting a financial advisor is also a good idea. Somebody who can actually work with both of you and plan out your future together. And that will also provide transparency, hopefully, because you'll be working up a financial statement, you'll be figuring things out together. And then before there are any large transfers to either children from a former marriage or other people, other family members, there should be a discussion with the financial advisor and perhaps even an attorney to make sure that you have adequately protected yourself. So, those are all the things that you can do before you get to the divorce. Now, I think your question went into what do we do during the divorce?
During and after.
So during the divorce, uh, hopefully you will continue working with a financial advisor. You will add an attorney to your team, perhaps even a therapist. If you're not working with a therapist, that would also be helpful. And you will start to, if you haven't paid it, close attention, you will be now going through documents and making sure that you get discovery and that you are asking the financial questions that need to be asked. And if you're not, that your attorney obviously is, so that you can build essentially a marital estate chart and figure out what needs to be divided, what the asset is, how it can be divided, and whether is going to be divided in kind or in some other manner, whether somebody's going to be actually bought out of their interest, whether that makes sense. And that's why it's important to have a financial advisor, your attorney. You may need a forensic accounting firm, which we often collaborate with, so that you can understand some of the more complicated financial issues and valuations. And then when you have all of that information, together, then hopefully you and your attorney and maybe even your financial advisor and forensic accountant will sit down and work together to put together a financial proposal and start the negotiation process. Or unfortunately, have a judge help you with that. Whether but that's your roadmap essentially. And then for after the divorce, once you have figured out what it is that you are obtaining and have obtained those assets, you're going to work hopefully with a financial advisor of some sort to make sure that you are earning as much income on those assets as you possibly can. And hopefully that you the right assets that to receive so that you can do that.
So you bring up something very interesting that I think happens in a lot of marriages or relationships, we'll say. And first of all, when you're going into a marriage, you don't think you're ever going to get divorced, right? I think the stats are 50% now, probably more than that, are getting divorced. Secondly, you bring up that you need to know what is going on financially in your home. And I think I tend to hear a lot of people say that, oh, so and so managed the money, or I just manage the money and they don't know what's going on. They didn't want anything to do with it. So one or the other is managing the monetary value, assets, bills, things like that. And so I think that's very interesting. You say you need to know about it, whether you're doing it or not, you need to have access. I hear people that pass away and they don't even know what was going on and financially. They don't even know where to start because they were never informed of anything that was going on. And it's crazy to me. But I think you bring up a very good point. We need to educate ourselves about even if we do trust our partner, we need to educate ourselves and keep up with that.
100%. And I'm going to say, even if you trust your partner, you're part of a partnership, is the point,
Mhm.
right? And if you want to have some say and some input into this partnership, then in terms of the finances, you need to be understanding what the finances are. And I don't think it has to be we all sit down and we have this big conversation once a month, but I do think that there needs to be an ongoing discussion from the very beginning of your marriage and all the way through of what investments are we going to decide to put our money in? And why are we doing that? And how did we choose those investments? And what is our spending like? And what's our burn rate every month? And are there places that we should cut back? Are there things that we should be doing differently? Are we planning for our retirement? All of these are conversations that people should be having. And you're right. I hear it every single day, okay, that we don't have these conversations, that he or she will not have them with me. And it I don't know how it got to that point. And and I shouldn't say that. I do know how it got to that point because sometimes we see it in the stage of the prenup where somebody does not want to be transparent, where there may be this family wealth and they don't want to necessarily have those conversations, or one person is working and the other person is not as a result of decisions that were made together. But that doesn't make one person less than the other in terms of having input and having access and doing all of those things that are part of a partnership. And so even if somebody is doing the management of it and they may be more skilled in the management of it or have the bandwidth or the time to do it, the other person needs to know what is happening.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point, right? Having a financial advisor. I know that's what I had. That was a very easy conversation. We knew once a quarter we were sitting down with our financial advisor and going through things. So it wasn't just one person in the relationship leading that conversation. It was somebody else as a third party, as you mentioned, that's leading that and asking those questions. And I think that might be non threatening too. How can a holistic approach benefit clients and families going through a divorce then?
So I think we talked about this a little bit. When we work with a client, we work with many different professionals as part of our matter. And there can be, for example, we talked about a forensic accountant, a therapist. It's one of the first questions I ask people during the first consultation is, do they have a therapist? And I was just speaking to a therapist in North Carolina today, and she said to me that she works with people in terms of their co-parenting and helping them learn how to co-parent. That's really important. Do they have a financial advisor? Is there an accountant? who's going to review the tax returns. We work certainly with all of these people. Vocational analysis is really important because the financial analysis is going to actually help you. I'm sorry, the vocational analysis, if somebody is not working up to their potential.
You- There's a lot of people walk into things unprepared and ask before divorce, what can you do? So I'm curious about this financial potential infidelity and abuse be traced in a divorce, and what are the warning signs to look out for? Because so many people say, yeah, I should have known, and there were some red flags, but maybe you could tell us what are some of the things that would be the red flag type of things to look out for so they can anticipate a little bit.
So I think when bank statements are not coming to the home, okay, or the passwords are changed and you can no longer access them. When your credit cards have been cut off or your the spending is been cut down, okay? When you no longer are getting access to the financial information generally, you don't know where the retirement monies are, you don't know what the spending is. There's no discussion, and it's basically a shut down and maybe even a shut up. Okay. That is certainly the time to know that these are red flags that are happening when foreclosure notices are coming to the house and you're not getting any explanation, when you're seeing credit cards declined, okay, just generally, or you go and you try to put insurance claims through and you're not getting any insurance claims back. There are so many red flags that I think people just ignore. I think the first red flag is you don't have access. Okay. When you don't have access, when you cannot see, when there's no visibility, then you need to stop and say, I have no visibility. I can't move forward.
Do you see that a lot of divorces maybe are caused by some financial struggles like that?
For sure. I think that we see divorces occur, I think, for a variety of reasons. One certainly is that one person is too controlling about money and the other person does not have the visibility or the power, and they're not working anymore as a team in any way, shape, or form. And maybe somebody is saying you're spending too much. Maybe somebody is saying you're giving me too little. That's already a problem because you're obviously not on the same page. And I often hear from people, I tell him or her that there's the spending is just too much. And I say, well, did you give them a budget? Did you talk about a budget? Did you sit down with a financial advisor? And often the answer is no, I didn't do that. I know how much I make and there's just too much spending. And or the opposite, which is uh, my credit cards were cut. But why were they cut? Were they cut because you went on a spending spree and the family cannot afford this? But again, just a lack of transparency.
Yeah. I find that very interesting. Yeah. It just happened to hit me as we were talking. Are high mortgage rates affecting people? When we look at where our economy is right now, is that affecting couples who jointly own the home?
Without a doubt, because the ability to refi. So normally somebody is going to want the marital home, whether it's the best thing to do or not. That's a different issue, but somebody's going to want the marital home. And now they have a mortgage and they need to refi that mortgage. And that mortgage payment is going to be so much more expensive than it was because the interest rates are so much higher. And that is a huge problem. And then the next question is going to be, why can't my spouse stay on the mortgage? And then the interest rate would be the same. And the real issue is then your spouse may not have the liquidity to move forward, okay, with their lives and buy another place or rent the place that they want to have or have the weekend house or do whatever it is that they want to do. Plus, you're not necessarily going to get full title when your spouse is on the mortgage because then they are going to have a debt with no assets. And that would not be a smart thing to do. So this concept of the buyout now is becoming hugely problematic. And it's interesting because I would say probably about a year ago, the Wall Street Journal had contacted me, and this was actually her question. And I hadn't seen much of it yet. She was a bit early on the issue, but now it is a huge issue. And there are people who now nest, and I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology, but they go in and out of the house. They both have access on different days to the house. So the children stay in the home and they actually have a separate place that they go to. And they do that so that they could both remain in the home for their parenting time and so that they don't have to refinance that mortgage. And then they'll sell the home when their children actually come of age. But you have to have two people who want to do that. And that is very unusual and it is a very difficult way to live.
Yeah, it is. I didn't know that was a term, but I knew what you were talking about. I want you to find it. I didn't know that was a term now. And I get it. It might be great for the kids, right? I do. You're not moving the kids and but that's not a life to move forward in, right? If you want another relationship or you want to move forward, how do you explain that? Oh, wait, I got to go spend the week in the house with the kids. Does that person come? Do they not? That gets in a whole other thing. But
Exactly.
can you go into a little bit because I think this is very problematic for everybody is I hear a lot of people saying they want me to sign a quick claim deed. What does a quick claim deed do? And what situation do you not want to get into where you don't have control over or have availability to any of the funds in the house if it is sold or when it's done with it?
This A quick claim deed is basically you should make sure that your title is completely clean because you are absolving the other person of everything. That's really what you're doing. So it's not that it's impossible to sign a quick claim deed. You just need to make sure you've done a really thorough title search. And it's certainly not unusual to get the other spouse off of the deed and off of the mortgage. I think the real problem isn't the quick claim deed. The real problem is should you be actually putting yourself in a situation where you're going to own that home in the first place? Can you afford it? What is the capital gain issue? Oh, who is going when you sell a house together during divorce? Usually, you split the brokerage fee in some manner. You split the costs of the sale in some manner. You could be looking at a lot of repairs and maintenance, et cetera. At capital gains taxes. If you're in Manhattan, you could be looking at mansion taxes, flip taxes, or transfer taxes, all of this kind of stuff. And so, are you willing to take all of that on by yourself, as opposed to if you were selling it together with your spouse and you both move on? Lots of people want to stay in the home for the children, which I totally understand. And that is their goal. And they are willing to do all of these things. The question is, was it financially savvy to do?
Yeah. And can you expand a little bit more on that when we're talking about refinancing? How do you know if you qualify for refinancing if they won't look at it if you don't have the deed in your name yet? Because you have to have all the information to go through and refinance. So what if you're taking that chance and putting the deed in your name, but then you can't refinance it? Then are you going to be stuck with you have to sell?
So the deed does not usually get transferred to your name until the mortgage is paid in some
Okay.
way or until the interest is actually paid out. And there is a way, of course, as you're going through the process, you could speak to a mortgage broker, you could speak to a loaning
Sure.
institution to figure out if you're going to actually be accepted for a mortgage. And there are certainly that is not unusual to do. You may not know, for example, what your spousal support is going to be or your child support is going to be, and that could make a difference, but you could look at worst case scenario, best case scenario, so you have a range, and then usually there's a period of time for which you can refinance and or the house gets sold. And so you just need to have a really good idea at that particular time when you're about to sign that agreement of whether or not you can qualify for that mortgage or not, or pay down a mortgage.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying because I know that does cause a lot of confusion.
Want to pick up on one of the points you made earlier. Said in the first call, you start asking some questions, some good questions, but I'm wondering how do you help clients navigate the emotional and the psychological aspects of divorce? And that's why I appreciate you said something like, do you have a therapist from one of your first calls or your first introductory meetings?
I
yeah,
have
we
to
do.
chime in here because I used my lawyer, my first lawyer, as my therapist too, and it cost a lot of money because you have to walk through it. So I'm very interested to hear what Lisa has to say.
So right, so that's the big no, right? Lawyers are not therapists. That's not what we're qualified to do. We hear a lot. Okay. So I'm not going to say that we know nothing because that would be really an underestimate of what we do. However, therapist definitely sees things from a different point of view. And we do ask that question because if there are co-parenting issues, if there's domestic violence, if there are other reasons that you're going through a divorce, you probably do want to have a therapist. And to your point, Kendra, you actually will save money by having this therapist because this therapist is going to be able to listen to these issues, okay, and hopefully have you narrow them to for when you get to your attorney. As I said, I was in a discussion earlier today, and the person used a perfect example. Somebody telling me for 17 minutes that their spouse did not have Thanksgiving with their child 6 years ago. I don't really need to know that 6 years ago that the spouse didn't have Thanksgiving, and I certainly don't need to know it for 17 minutes. But that is something you can share with your therapist, and hopefully your therapist will say, that Lisa probably doesn't need to know that, but Lisa does need to know if your spouse is bad mouthing you to the children, or your spouse is verbally abusing you in front of the children or saying to the children, I'm going to tell you everything about the affair or all of those kinds of things. Those would be important things that you want to be able to share with your attorney. And so I think having a therapist is a great place to narrow some of the issues and also understand which issues need to be targeted for your attorney. I think that the caveat to all this is that you need to find a therapist who is very skilled in the area of divorce. So it is not just okay to find a therapist. You need to find a therapist who is experienced in complex divorces, if that's what you're going through, who understands how court works, who understands how negotiations work, who isn't just going to be there and frankly say, "Oh, I understand, and I understand, and I understand." They need to be like there needs to be some dynamic here of a little back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And we all have specialties, right? So we got to reach out to that specialist to talk to. So, yes. Very good input. I will say that was a tough one for me because you are so emotionally involved in it, right? And you are close to your attorney when you're going through it. But some of those things you just don't need to share. You don't need to pick up the phone because I realized, and you can elaborate on this, Lisa, but court does not move as fast as what we want. Something happens today, it's not going to get heard for months down the road. So there is no reason you need to flip out and call your attorney and say, "This happened. Can we file?" You might be able to file something, but it's not going to be heard for months, right? So it's not critical that you have to have a response today.
That's 100% true. And I think that what people need to understand is there are some critical things that they need that your attorney needs to hear. But if you are constantly saying that this is critical that you hear it today, frankly, the attorney has a lot of clients, and if they all are saying all of that everything is critical at that moment, then how would they sort out the triage, right? There's always a triage in a matrimonial attorney's office. And so you need to be able to figure out what is urgent. And if it's urgent, people know that they can text me. If there's an urgent situation, we will deal with it. You go to the top of our list, okay, of the
Can you
day.
identify some of those what might be critical or urgent? So just a
Sure.
couple of examples so people understand.
Sure. It is it's tax time, okay? And your spouse is absolutely demanding that you sign the tax return. And it is literally the April 15th. And nobody, of course, let the attorneys know that this was happening. Okay. And you guys knew that taxes were coming, but okay, here it is. And that's a critical issue because you're not going to sign that tax return without speaking to your attorney and perhaps making sure that there's an indemnification agreement that goes along with that tax return so that you're not admitting or denying somebody's income, so that you're not responsible if they misreport, all of those kinds of things. That's an urgent situation because of the timing of the situation. It's a holiday and Christmas is coming and you still have not sorted out the Christmas plans. That's probably urgent because the court is not going to be necessarily around for Christmas week. And that needs to be sorted out. That's an urgent issue at that point. Somebody has actually abused you in some way and you needed to call the police and you filed a police report. There may be an order of protection that is needed at that point. That's urgent. your child was scheduled to have access with you, and the parent did not actually produce the child for access with you. That would be urgent. But what happened 4 years ago that you just put together in your mind wasn't really urgent today. Okay.
Yeah.
Or something that we're going to deal with in court, and you know that we're going to deal with it in court in 2 months from now. Probably not urgent. That could probably wait till the following week. It doesn't need to be the weekend call. And we get those. We get the
Yeah.
weekend texts, all of those.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Thank you for clarifying. That helped, I think. Mick, do you have any other follow up questions with that?
I'm just curious about some resources or things that you might suggest because this is really an enlightening conversation. And then, of course, we'd always want people to reach out to you too so they can get a hold of you.
S- Look, I'm on the board of a wonderful organization. It's called Savvy Ladies. I would say that if you have financial questions, just generally, Savvy Ladies is devoted to non-for-profit organization, and it actually has volunteer financial professionals who pair women one-to-one with financial professionals to answer their financial questions. So they may have a financial question as they're going through a divorce or for other reasons. That's a great organization. If there is domestic violence, there are definitely areas where women can go. Hope Store is one of them in Westchester County, for example. But there are various other sanctuary for families in various areas. There are a lot of organizations that are geared toward domestic violence where you can actually get help. So those would be good resources. The bar associations, if you're looking for an attorney and you can't find an attorney, the New York State Bar Association, the Women's Bar Association, all of those are good resources to have. There is an organization that I'm also on the board of, which is called Family Legal Care, and they actually will help people who cannot get attorneys and who are self-representing themselves. They will help actually fill out the forms and help them learn to advocate for themselves. So that is also a great organization. All of these can be found online.
Great. And it sounds like some are specific to New York, and our listeners are even across the world. So we're top 5%. But I think that, like, maybe the Bar Association I know is in every state in the US. Are there others that you said would go wide?
So Savvy Ladies is nationwide. I will say
Okay.
that. It's not out of the country, but it's definitely nationwide.
Okay.
And so that's an important organization for people. Family Legal Care is definitely New York
Okay.
State, actually. So it does go up to the boroughs as well, outside the boroughs. But I would say that probably in just about every state and probably just about every country, there are areas for domestic violence, centers for domestic violence, et cetera. So I think that there are places for people to find help.
Great. Okay. Those will be in the show notes too.
Uh, And we want to make sure that people can reach out to you too. So what's your contact information and how can get in touch
So,
with you?
so they can go to lisazeiderman.com, and that is, there is a place to contact through that. I also have a blog and a lot of information there that they can read. A lot of my articles I publish in Psychology Today approximately once a month, and some other magazines, etc. They can go to my LinkedIn, and they can also email me at lz@mzw-law.com, and they can call at 914-455-1000.
Great.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for your time. Excuse me. Thank you. And we appreciate taking time out of your busy schedule. A very enlightening interview and conversation. Thank you, Lisa. So if you like this episode and other episodes of The Aftermath, make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and of course, positively review us on Apple Podcasts. That helps a great deal. For example, we've had supporters and sponsors along the way during the podcast. Hope Brazell is one of those people who we've interviewed and hope you can check her out as well. She's a life coach who guides women to discover their potential. She has coaching programs. She's active in media. She has blog resources. She also has a master's degree from the London School of Economics. I'm not sure if she knows Mick Jagger, but that's background. You should check her out as well.
And we interviewed her about a year ago. Is that right, Mick?
That's correct. Yes. And we can always put that in the show notes and also encourage people to contact her and listen to that episode because that was a very good episode.
It was. It was.
So until next time, the next episode, we'll see you then. Deus Volt.